So Taylor, it is you're probably the biggest YouTuber I think that we've had on the podcast. But then the reality is that you're you know that phrase, get you a man that can do both. I think you're the guy that does everything. So welcome to the Bearded Dog. And yeah, that's who you are. I was like trying to write a description for you, and I was like, oh, Taylor does everything.
Yeah, it's well, you got to keep it interesting. I appreciate you reaching out and being here. Hopefully it's a fun and valuable hour-ish or so for listeners.
Yeah, or it's just an hour of two bearded dudes jibber jabbering. That's fine too, though.
That's fine too. Yeah, people are into that, I think.
I heard about you through probably like pre-COVID, so I want to say like 2.5, 3 years ago. You're at WPPI, which I've never been to, but you follow the stories and your friends are all there and all that stuff. And my friend and wedding photographer Sam Hurd was like interacting with you, and I was like, oh, okay, who's this Taylor guy? And I was like, oh, he's a Canadian guy who does everything. I was like, great.
Yeah.
Way to
Sam was our wedding photographer as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
We brought him up here to we're like an hour outside of Toronto, and we had 2 weddings, so we had a destination wedding, and if you get married in Mexico, there's a couple strange things if you're a foreign citizen. I think you still have to give blood, and also your ceremony has to be in Spanish. And we're like Canadian / we have exposure to French, but not a whole lot of Spanish. So we were like, well, maybe we'll do the legal part here. So Sam came and did the legal ceremony. We did a Taco Tuesday wedding, and then we went and flew down.
Dude,
he didn't
that's
come
awesome.
with us to Mexico, sadly. But
dang, man, you have to give blood. That's awesome. I would love to see that in an American ceremony now, like live at the ceremony, instead of like a feet washing ceremony or tying knots or some BS. They're like, we're about to give each other's blood. Let's go.
Yeah, this is the new. That's got to be like, that was probably a thing at some point. I don't even know why. I should research this to make sure this is a real thing and it's not just like a fairy tale that I was told one time and I'm like, that sounds like a story I should repeat on podcasts and tell people about. And,
yeah. Or like, it could be, I know you've traveled a lot, and same thing here where you're like, you always hear the person talk and you analyze their tone, but you don't speak the language. You have an interpreter maybe, or somebody who's kind of helping out, and you go, I'm not sure that felt the same way as what this person said. So like, maybe it's, and then you could find out too, like, oh, the word for signature is blood, or it's very similar, or like he messed it up or whatever. And you're like, oh, I've been telling this different story. So that's awesome. Well, yeah, tell me, give me a little bit of background. I know the current Taylor, or at least like the past 3 year Taylor, but give me a little bit of background. I know you've been doing, we'll just say content, even though everyone hates that word, but that's true, for 15 years. What was life like before that? And then kind of how did you drum up your start?
Yeah, so I would say that at least I got into photography. I was a concert / music photographer for a long time. So awesome. When MySpace was the place to be, I would pretty much, I'm going to say that I went to a concert every other day for about 2 or 3 years of my life. I'd just be driving back and forth from Toronto. But like every single band was on tour, so it was so easy. So I saw, fortunately, like probably every band that I ever wanted to see. I kind of leapfrogged off of like a few of the opening acts. So like there were a few local bands that got pretty big, and they started opening for like Alexis on Fire and that kind of Canadian band kind of in their at least Canadian prime, and they just kind of like absolutely exploded. So I kind of got hooked up through them, and then now I've shot like Alexis on Fire, and with that little piece of portfolio, when like Dashboard Confessional comes to town, I'm like, hey, like reach out to his PR agency, and it's like, hey, here's what I do. I'm kind of freelance, but also kind of working for this like website blog, and I'm also giving you guys access to the photos as well with credit, which I don't think was a thing that a lot of people were doing at the time, and maybe I was ruining the industry, quote unquote. But it was just like, I just wanted to go, and I just wanted to have access. And I found that by offering a little bit more, I got a little bit more backstage access. And now all of a sudden I could hang out there rather than like only access in the photo pit for the first couple songs. So it unlocked some unique opportunities. I got to interview some of the bands. We just started reaching out and being like, hey, like we would love to interview you before the set. And they were like, yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, oh shit, now I got to find a place to like put this. So I connected even more with local magazines being like, hey, by the way, like we're interviewing this band. Love to do a photo set for you. And that's kind of the way that all started to work out. And I was getting paid in t-shirts at the time. I wasn't really making any real money.
And free tickets, rather.
But it was like what I wanted to be doing. And I was like, I don't know, like 18, 19, 20. So like, why not? I got to do what I love to do. I was working at Outback Steakhouse back here, and it paid enough money to be able to do that. So that was really cool. That was another thing that I learned is that if you want to have kind of that maximum life flexibility and you're in an office job, it's very difficult. But if you're a server, you can make a lot of money in a very short period of time that you can go in, and like some of the nights you could just make $300 cash and leave.
Yeah.
And if you could pick and choose kind of the shifts that you knew were going to be the best, you could do very well with very small hours worked. So I kind of did that. And then I would just kind of checkerboard that with going to concerts and making no money there. And then I was also into kind of the skateboard, snowboard scene as well. Again, not really. I kind of sat back at some point and I was like, well, how do I actually make a career in photography? And it was kind of challenging. Like I literally went online and I was like, what jobs in photography make money? And it's like National Geographic photographer. I'm like, that sounds awesome, but how achievable is that? Like that seems like there's no direct, not even a reasonably direct route to it. Especially with kind of the decline of all the like the photography schools and everything, that there's no, like, you can't just go to a program and be guaranteed that you're now all of a sudden like, okay, cool. Like I'm going to school to be a National Geographic photographer. Right. And then if I would have got out of school, like they kind of cut a lot of their staff probably around that time. So yeah, it was like, what do I do? Wedding photography was like always like number one on like, or at least like number 2 or 3 usually on the like what jobs actually pay money in photography space. And I was like, that sounds kind of fun. Maybe I'll try that.
Yeah.
So around that time, I was like 21 maybe, and a few of my friends started getting married. They were, I guess, on the younger end of things now. And yeah, it was just like, well, we like Taylor. He comes and photographs our band. Like, I'm sure that like we're comfortable with him. We don't really want a wedding photographer because that seems weird.
Yeah.
So they brought me out and I did a few. And when you work with your friends, it's amazing. And then I realized that if you're booking the wrong couples off of like Craigslist, weddings are like the absolute worst job that you could ever have. And it's like polar, the best day ever or absolute worst work environment that you've ever experienced. And there was like no in between. So I basically had to figure out how do I shoot weddings for my friends every weekend, or friends that I haven't met yet. And that took me to weddings. And since then I kind of ramped that up pretty quick. I realized that like, hey, this actually pays money, which is nice. And also it kind of is a culmination of all the skills that I learned, specifically in like concerts, making crappy nightclubs around here actually look good, with like off-camera flash and actually capturing the correct moments. And I was always kind of big on both capturing the band and also kind of the experience of the show as well. So that was essentially like, that's how I learned to shoot a reception, or first dances or whatever. And then everything else, once you learn in such extreme conditions, everything else is super easy. The fact that I'm going to a wedding and people have put money into it to make it look nice was so far like, like I'm used to going to the worst conditions, like make this look good or make this look cool. Yeah. And now it's like, oh, we're actually going to spend money and we can actually shoot over golden hour. Wow. This is nice. So
easy. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what brought me to weddings. And then since then I've just continued, I think even back at the early stages of weddings, like my thing was always just, create the portfolio that you want to exist and keep at that. And I think I did that for weddings. And then since then we've done it for travel content as well. We work with Nikon now. And yeah, that's kind of how that all comes together, that I just keep building what I want to be getting paid for 5 years from now. It makes no money right now, but 5 years from now, it might unlock that opportunity and lead to something cool. So yeah.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I had no idea about the concert thing. You can see the guitars in the background for the video. I toured in a metal band. And got my start shooting concerts, literally one because it was cool and it was a free way to get to see the bands and all that kind of stuff, and almost like exactly what you mentioned, there's beauty in like kind of not knowing what was going on, or like my connection was the musical connection, so I was like, okay, yeah, like this is when the beat will drop, or this doesn't happen in metal too often, but like this is like when this cool riff comes up and everybody's going to be stoked. And like the band, obviously there are photos of the bands doing stuff, but they want to see like what makes them look like a lot of people came to the show, or this is this big crowd or whatever. Or like I did a lot of the like contact the opening band and be like, hey, can I just be on for the whole set, or the whole tour or whatever? And they were like, yeah. And it's so cool. I want to ask you kind of nitty gritty just for starting out there, because we have a few music photographers who listen. What was that early, like how did you know to kind of like gain trust through like a carrot. I call it a carrot action, like by giving something. Did you kind of have an idea of what the music industry was like? Did you know to talk to the PR persons? Did you learn that over time? Like, and then also too, how did you know to pitch to other magazines when you were already doing stuff? I feel like that early on, like I was faking it, you know, like I knew the music ideas and I knew like, okay, I'm going to contact either the band or the PR person, and it's better if I have an outlet, but I didn't know kind of the next level of that. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about, especially that early, man. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was all figuring stuff out as I went, that like I would learn. It feels like now that I learned things very slowly over time. It feels like at that time that I was learning something dramatically that would change everything like every other week. So it was kind of all like I would do one job and then I would get connected and it's like, oh, I'm talking to like this PR manager now. Okay, maybe that's how this industry works. And there were no articles, there was no YouTube video that you could go and watch to like get any sort of understanding. There was 2 or 3 different kind of web magazines that were in Toronto at the time. And I just reached out to one. I'm like, hey, here's my portfolio. Would love to shoot like anything you guys have space for. Sure. And they were kind of like, well, we don't have anyone in kind of the Kitchener-Waterloo area, which is where I'm from, an hour outside of Toronto. Yeah. They're like, we don't really have anyone there. So if you just want to start shooting local bands, like their thing was just they needed content, like to sell ads. They need more stuff on their website. They need more eyeballs coming in. They need their logo on more people's MySpace profile display images. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Like I'd love to kind of, and that's kind of like all leveraging that. And now all of a sudden I have this kind of association that now I can have access to some other bands and other bands that have maybe already shot with somebody else that's part of the magazine and they kind of know its value. So that's kind of how I went. And then it kind of split up if, say, for instance, there was obviously some senior photographers that were involved in that. And if it was a big show, one of the senior people would be covering it. And we'd only get like one photo ticket plus maybe a reviewer ticket. Yeah. So in that case, I would have to kind of go to other outlets. And they were just literally people that I would meet in the photo pit and like, oh, who are you shooting for? Oh, Toronto Life. Okay, cool. Like I'll keep that in mind. And a lot of those guys, like it's such a small community, but a lot of them are still friends. And I definitely I didn't really, I guess I cold emailed people, but it was definitely like, okay, so these are the types of magazines and people that or organizations that are sending people to concerts and posting images. So if Toronto Life dude's not there, then maybe all of a sudden I can like get access under their media badge and get it.
Just, yeah, no, totally. It's one of those things where I think like knowing what they want, you know, honestly, or what somebody else wants, or if you're offering something different, right? Like I think anytime in a space like that where again, like you're seeing the same old kind of stuff, right? The magazines are like, yep, like we literally just need a photo, right? Like if Washington Post sent a photographer to shoot a band, and obviously you have these good photographers, right? Like almost Pulitzer winning people, you'd be like, okay, it's a photo of the band. Thanks everybody. But like the band would be like, do we look cool enough? Or like, does this emphasize like how many people were there or whatever? And, you know, having something different to bring in there or whatever, or again, like the experience and BTS stuff that now is standard, you know, like you look at any major music artist's Instagram when they're on tour, at least, and it's like, you know, lots of behind the scenes. Or you think of like at Daniel, John Mayer's photographer, you know, that kind of stuff, or Andy Barron, all these good people who like get behind the scenes and kind of like just cool stuff that I think like as photographers, like we want to look at a book of that someday and be like, oh, this is the tour from, you know, 1999 and 2000 or whatever. Or maybe we're just old and this is dumb. But anyway, tell me, I want to know, one, can I be on this list? No. Who would be on your MySpace top 8 for photography content creators? Like who are your top 8 heroes right now?
Oh, that's awesome. This is a question that I don't think anyone has ever asked on a podcast especially since like 2012, maybe. Yeah. I would say, so this is kind of an out of order top 8. I'll just kind of ram off some people that have either inspired me in the past or have kind of contributed to where I'm at. I'm going to say Jerry Jonas, wedding photographer, amazing portrait photographer. They're in Vegas now. He's originally from Melbourne, Australia. He was the first one to bring a camera behind the scenes to wedding days, at least that I saw. Yeah. So he was the first dude to be out there. This would have been like 2007, 2008. Wow. The first one to go out with like a crew and actually show the behind the scenes of a wedding day. As somebody that wanted to get into wedding photography, it was kind of an unknown that I was still kind of young. I hadn't really been to many weddings. I think I was a ring bearer at one. But prior to that, like I had no experience. I didn't know, like no visibility on what a wedding day was, what it looked like, how the flow was. And just by watching his videos, like that kind of demystified a little bit of that. So I credit him for a lot of how quickly I was able to actually get into the industry and become comfortable in it. He's very, very heavily posed. And I feel like I'm very candid, not posed.
Sure.
So it's also very interesting to learn from somebody that is the complete opposite brain pattern as you when you walk into a scene. So I feel like I learned a lot from that, and it filled in a couple of the blanks that maybe I had that I didn't even know that I had at that time.
Totally. It's like another discipline, you know, at some level.
It gives you tools. Like it gives you tools that you can use whenever you need to if you walk into a scene. And I still get this today, or that, like, maybe not this year. We didn't really have a whole lot of weddings this year or last year. But prior to that, like I'd walk into wedding day and it's like, whoa, this is like a very formal, like you're looking for that post photographer, and I can play that role for the day because of kind of all these things that I've collected. It's not like my natural place, but I can kind of fake it to a very professional level, no problem if I need to. So I'd say he's kind of a piece of that. I would say another big piece, this is outside of the wedding and kind of just more the YouTube content space that we're after. Anthony Bourdain was a huge influence for me. Pretty much everything that he and his crew did. I love the fact that it was like him and maybe 2 or 3 people, at least in the beginning. Maybe it was more for like chef's tour and whatnot.
Sure.
But yeah, they would just go out as a team and they would just kind of have a rough script or a rough idea of kind of the story that they wanted to tell. They'd go out and see how it came together. And if it came together completely different, then you just kind of fix it and post with voiceover and you find the story. And I think a lot of his travel content is kind of what we model after, but again, like completely different situations that we don't do meal scenes. We don't sit down with people. As an introverted person, I find it very difficult to reach out to people. If I kind of know them and I know that they're also like weird and awkward, it's like way easier. But to reach out to just like somebody's like grandmother and be like, hey, we'd love to, like, we're in Istanbul. We'd love to have like some home cooking. Yeah. I would love to do that, but I am just so far out of my element and I would not be super comfortable in that situation. So we don't do stuff like that. And we kind of more focus on the photography and the creative side, because that's kind of where our comfort is. I'm trying to think who would be beyond
6 more, man.
That's so many.
I love it. This could be its own show right here.
Yeah. I'm going to name Pierre Lambert. He's another YouTube creator.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've watched any of his stuff, but Pierre just has such an amazing, infectious personality that he's just so stoked to be out there taking pictures. Okay. And he just does kind of like behind the scenes street style stuff that he'll just have a GoPro mounted to his chest and he'll just like go for a walk around, like around whatever town he's in. And he'll approach people and do like on the spot portrait sessions with them and stuff like that. And again, something that I could never really do comfortably, but it's so cool to see how he does it and how it just comes completely naturally to him. And it's just totally normal. And it makes everybody feel like, I don't know, like they're a little tiny rock star for the day when when he's like at a market and he's like, you like, can I take a picture? And not even in English, and is like pretty good Spanish for a French dude. Yeah. That he'll like start speaking to them and just like all of a sudden, like they're doing like this mini portrait session, like golden hour at 6 a.m. And it's like, how did that come together? Like, that's crazy. Yeah. And you watch it and you could never replicate it. Yeah. But it's just his smile and his presence, I think, that he kind of comes out there with. I'll do another one. Casey Neistat, I think, was also one of the huge, I would say, like kind of the people that pushed content creation in a space that you didn't need the best gear all of a sudden. That if you had like, I don't know, like whatever it was at the time, like Canon D or 80D and like a super wide lens, like
35.
That you could tell an amazing story, and that it's not all about the gear. And then maybe on the other side of that, at least in the beginning, Peter McKinnon, like the way that he took kind of what Casey was doing and stepped that up to a completely next level when it comes to cinematic elements, and focused really hard on telling a beautiful visual story as well as a story that he actually, like, I don't know, wanted to tell. So
those are super good. Even Casey's his like he's on a road trip with his father-in-law right now on Twitter,
Yeah.
and he's been like updating this thread from driving from LA to Massachusetts, and even just that shows you like what kind of storyteller he is and like what details are coming out. And yeah, I got to meet and shoot Casey 3 years ago, and it's still, he didn't give me credit, which it was like a luxury event, you know. So like I don't think it's a proper. It makes sense nowadays. The creator culture is like, yeah, credit your creatives, but I didn't really mind. I mean, it would have been awesome, but it's my most liked image, I think, like on the internet. He posted the one of him and Candace, and like his storytelling, yeah, just exactly like what you said. He's very much like a I don't care about gear at all, like quit your BS kind of stuff. Like he'd be a very tough dad in the creative world, but it'd be good. And then like, yeah, I think you'd be storytelling with Casey, and then Peter would be like, okay, let's make it beautiful. Let's use the same stuff and like let's make it beautiful, and then like be a little bit more. I mean, Peter feels younger than Casey, so it like has this vibe. I think he's probably like a smidge younger, but he's also like a dad and stuff. So like, yeah, that's super cool. That's awesome. Everybody loves Peter McKinnon. That would be my dream to have either of those guys on this podcast. So.
It'll probably happen.
Yeah, I'm trying. We're working on it. We keep getting more fun and bigger guests. And like when we put the podcast on YouTube, I was like, oh, I'm going to start reaching out to like people who I know as YouTubers and like talk to them. And a lot of them, like you or Eric Floberg, you know, all have like backgrounds and different stuff. And so I'm like, yeah, it's super fun. Like just have those conversations. So that's awesome. Anybody else you could think of?
Yeah, now that you mentioned Eric, like there's so many
Yeah.
other YouTube photographers that I left out that have amazing content, and it's like it's crazy because everyone's putting pretty much, if you're a professional YouTuber in a lot of ways, you're putting kind of like your entire life that is your full-time plus job to do. Yeah. So everyone that does it pretty much does an amazing job at it. So sorry if I left anyone out, but there's so, and it's like, as soon as you get into a niche, like, it's like, oh, like I'd like to learn more about shooting Portra 400. And then you just go down the Joe Greer rabbit hole of just like, oh, now I'm going to watch all his videos. And like, yeah, I enjoy it. I'm happy that there's that much content out. It's totally. So niche specific as well.
Yeah. I love that. It's so funny. It's a Joe Greer, or like you could do like Benj Heish now, who like stepped into YouTube. We're like, bro, can you not take over every industry for us, please? He's the man. He's awesome. I'm hoping to see him in a few weeks, hopefully. Yeah, I want to know I have one kind of like specific topic thing that I want to talk about. Actually, two. I lied. Tell me, what has been your experience? You seem super gung-ho on Reels and TikToks, which now this feels like old news. Like it should be like, duh, like you should get into it. But there's still, including myself, for me, it's probably just laziness, right? Like my bottom line doesn't need it. But I could be convinced otherwise, you know, or it just, you know, we're trying to focus on other sources. But for you, like, tell me everything you know about TikTok. No, like what got you into it, and was it just like, okay, here, let me try it out. It's really fun. I'm able to grow quickly, and then like, what have you kind of learned along the way?
Yeah. So basically, what happened, at least with TikTok, was that I knew that I probably should have been on it about a year ago, and then I just didn't ever do it. And then we went back into another situation where everything closed here. Yeah. And it was last month for an entire month, pretty much. And I was kind of looking at my calendar, and I was like, what do I do for that month that'll keep me creative and doing things when we can't do shoots outside and can't go to restaurants and whatnot? I'm like, I'll do this. For 30 days, I'll just make TikTok content every single day. And I would say that I knew that the organic reach was there. I was like, oh yeah, like I know that if you make something that's good, that people will see it, even if you don't have a big following. I knew that was true. What I didn't realize was how locally focused it is, that if you create something in your local area, that people from like 2 or 3 hours around are going to be the people that mainly see your content, especially if you hashtag for that. I didn't realize the power in that. And I made, I think, one video, and I was looking at the stats of it. I think it got to maybe 100,000 views or something. This is when I had, I'm going to say I had like maybe 500 followers. Yeah. And it got to 100,000 views. So I'm like, wow, that's pretty crazy that it reached that many people. Yeah. And then I looked at the stats, and I think 94% was in Canada. So 94%, so 94,000 people within Canada, which is a population of like 37 million or something like that. Yeah. So I'm like, I reached like a percentage, like almost a percentage of people that live in Canada with this post. So I thought that was pretty crazy. So I started making basically test content for the entire month. That I do make YouTube content. I realized pretty quickly that there's, at least as of the time of recording this, that there's not a whole lot of appetite for photography content on TikTok. That is way more of kind of a general platform. You definitely can create content within that space, and you can do okay. But I think the power really comes when you're doing local storytelling or creating local humorous content that connects very quickly with an audience of local people, but is also done in a way that can scale out of that very quickly. So if TikTok basically decides like, hey, we're going to start showing your content to these 10 people, and if they respond well to it, then all of a sudden it's going to show to 100 people and then 1,000 people. And if you can create content that is locally focused, that appeals to a mass audience, it just like, it goes nuts. Especially if there's obviously like a lot that goes into the algorithm of what it chooses to show, and what you can do to inspire people to react to your videos. That gets like, obviously shows TikTok that like, oh, this person liked this video and they don't like any videos, so maybe this is an important video. So there's a lot of like things you can do to really extend the reach. But yeah, it was crazy that we just kind of did some stuff locally and it just really took off.
What's that look like? You know, as far as an example of something local that like, you know, is also has like a more general topic, but is local. You know, I'm thinking of like, especially for somebody where you mentioned like photo video content is not super popular on there. What kind of stuff are you creating that you feel like is going to pop and help? And, you know, because I think like we get stuck, people listening, right? And photo creators, we're like, okay, here are my photos, you know, and then the next step is here's how I made these photos, and then here's how I got paid to make these photos, and so it's still connected right to this like circle or this hub, if you will. But like, how are you breaking out of that? And you know, do you just come up with different ideas? Or I think I've seen you like do golf stuff on TikTok and Reels or whatever. So like, or are you just trying to just grow for the sake of growing and creating fun stuff?
It was, so I guess it comes as multiple different hats, because I am kind of a YouTube creator as well as somebody that I enjoy teaching kind of what I've learned and experimenting. So my TikTok presence is not one that I don't think anyone should follow if they are trying to grow kind of that local brand. But what we've done, I just kind of saw opportunities that were locally focused. Again, like everything closed down, golf courses were closed for a month. So that golf reference, like, basically we decided that it would be funny to golf in the streets of our city. And we just went out at 6 a.m. when there were no cars, and we used like foam balls, and we brought a grass little AstroTurf mat. It's actually a dog mat for like apartments or whatever.
I love it.
And we were just like, wouldn't it be funny for 15 seconds to just like do this like uptown golfing in the middle of the street? And it was a little bit of a jab at the fact that like, why aren't golf courses open? This is weird. Like, they're the most socially distant thing that like you can kind of do. So it was like a small jab at that. So we were like, well, maybe the news will pick it up. Like, it's a pretty funny way to kind of to talk about it without being like complaining and doing something that's humorous. But then also doing it in a way that if you see somebody golfing in the main street of your city and like actually hitting balls, that's something that's like instantly like you recognize those landmarks and you're like, this is in my city. Like, I'm going to watch this. I'm going to send this to a friend. And then beyond that, it kind of appeals to everyone that is interested in golf because it's so crazy and ridiculous. And I hadn't actually seen anyone do it, which is kind of weird because it's been a thing that we've talked about and would be funny for years. And we're just like, I don't know, if we're not going to do it, who else is going to do it? And we just kind of did that. And it took off. We got the front page of our newspaper, our local newspaper somehow. I was on like news radio for it and a bunch of other things. So like locally facing content, like it just really kind of takes off on that platform. And it gets you into places like now all of a sudden you have like more stamps of approval on your photography website, like as seen on the front page of your newspaper, and like some pretty major credibility indicators for just like creating just content that's honestly fun to do. And we were done and wrapped before 6:45 in the morning. So like, I don't know, I wouldn't even be up by then if I didn't have that reason. So it's kind of fun having a reason to go out and do stuff like that too.
Definitely. Yeah. It's like you get to create something that's funny and kind of topical, local, you know, but at the same time, you're like, you know, one, you're not getting paid for it, right? But it you know, so I think people like shy away from that. But it's like, no, this will just be funny, you know, or this will like satisfy a silly creative need or whatever. And it's like, you know, you even mentioning like, hey, as seen on your site, part of me is like, oh, it's not even related to creating, but you're like, no, 100%. Like you had an idea and we're like, hey, this is what we want to shoot and we're going to try and do it. And it got us there. So I think that's like 100% valid. That's super cool. That's awesome. Why do you say, you shouldn't, judge your TikTok? Are you like trying to, not do too much on it? Or, I mean, because I've seen your reels and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah, it's very much all over the place. One thing I realized with TikTok is that each video very much stands independently on its own, which is both good and also sad. So basically, if you do have 50,000 followers or whatever, and you upload a crappy video, it's going to show it to like 10 people, and then it's just going to kill it. And if you upload a great video, it doesn't matter if you have 1 million followers or if you have, quite honestly, 5 followers. If you make a great video, it will get out there. It'll take a few more minutes or maybe a day or two, but it can get traction. My specific presence, I kind of just went all over the place because I was like, once I saw that, I was like, okay, this is great. Like it's the negative with doing content that's all over the place is that if somebody does come to your profile, they're probably not going to give you a follow because they're like, what is going on here? Like I came over here from a golf video and this is the only golf video he's ever done. So you're not going to generate following based on that. But you do kind of generate those credibility indicators that now, this video, all of a sudden it has 10 million views. Like totally. You start getting recognized by 16-year-olds in your local area, which is a weird and new thing. Yeah, it's happened like 4 or 5 times now. It's like very strange. But it's like a completely different market, I think, than what I exist in. I'm very comfortable in the Facebook and Instagram space. But when you look at any graph, anyone that's under the age of 20 does not care about Facebook at all. So you can kind of look at the timeline of that. And if they hate it now, they're really going to hate it when they're 25 and all of a sudden they're at the age to get married. And if I can be in front of the customer at this point and kind of grow with them over a couple of years, I would way rather do that than try to like spin my wheels harder on a space that's dying. And like, well, Facebook ads work really, really well now. If nobody's on Facebook, all of a sudden it's going to be a very challenging, like, cool, you're the best at Facebook ads. Unfortunately, you have no clients on there. No one's looking for wedding photography anymore on Facebook. Right. Not yet, but I can definitely see that coming in like 10 years or so. So that's kind of another, I guess, thing to future-proof a little bit. Sure. And then for TikTok, it's like very much on easy mode right now as far as building a following. So I think I built up to like 50,000 followers or so in less than a month. Wow. And to do that on Instagram, like, I don't think you could. Like that's like a 10K in a year is good on Instagram. Yeah. And to be in front of 50,000 mostly local people all of a sudden, that my content will be organically shared more to them. Again, if I make a crappy video, it's not going to show it to anyone. But like, that's a lot of local people. Probably like 35 to 40,000 of those are like in the Toronto area, which is crazy high density. And they're all people that, like, I'm sure there is some crossover, but for the most part, they are not people that were ever following me on Instagram. Right. And they're a completely new audience and a younger audience as well. So there's opportunities, but again, it takes time and effort to invest in something that's not going to directly make you money right away. Totally.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's an element, ironically, Sam Hurt said this and got some flack for this, but he was like, I don't want to dance or make jokes to market myself or something like that. And, I get his sentiment too, right? Like, he wants to just, he quintessentially wants to be hired for what he makes, right? Yeah. Like, that's it. That's 2 clients of his. He's like, this is what I do, which I think is cool and super great guy, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like, there definitely is like, being open to innovation or trying new things, or like, I've watched a few things of yours, a lot of things of yours, and something, we talk about is like this efficiency, or we talk about like how you're a multi-purpose creator essentially, and it hasn't hurt your wedding business, but you've been doing it for a long time. So you have like this other variable, and like, you're also fine with like trying something out and being like, hey, cool. And I think too, it's helpful when you have a large enough following somewhere to at least like give a little kickstart, or at least you feel like other people are going to watch, something you make, I don't know. That's kind of rambling, but what do you think about all that, or what Sam said?
Yeah, it's well, like I would say that those, you can kind of distill your personality into whatever elements you want it to be, or you can be kind of anything that you want to be on TikTok, or on if you want to be like actual proper serious artist, like to the next level, like there's a market for that. I'm sure that people will interact with that. If you want to be Jonathan Suckling out in New Zealand and like literally be dancing while shooting, like if you look at his comments, he has booked so many weddings from those videos. Like it might seem like silly and weird, but like that's his personality, and he is like absolutely killing it off of those videos. And yeah, so there's I guess ideal clients for everyone, and kind of finding whatever content that you want to create and whatever you would interact with and you would enjoy. I feel like it's kind of the step, whether you're on YouTube or you're on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. It really doesn't matter, as long as you're creating content kind of for yourself and another body, maybe a little bit more general so that you can reach a few more people. I feel like that's kind of, I guess, content distilled, like that's what you want to be creating if you want to have it help your business and to actually contribute to your bottom line.
Totally. And I mean, I think there's an element, of our job where we're about to, this kind of bridges into our next topic, is like what we want to do is create. And usually the only time we're essentially making money is when we are actually creating, right? For wedding photographers, it's like when we are at the wedding day pressing a button, that is when we are like hopefully the most happy, and that's when we're making the money. The year up before then, like technically, yes, you got revenue, but like that day is the day that we're making it. The day after, we're not making anything. Like you better get it done. And, but to run a business side of things, it's like everything else you have to cater to and have to have some stuff, right? You have to have even just a website, right? Or you have to have other parts of this business. And I think like, something I feel like you do a really good job of replicating what a lot of Gary Vee used to say like 3, 4, 5 years ago, where he was like, if you're a realtor, you're now a realty media company. If you're a photographer, you're a photographer media company. And a lot of people hated that, right? And it sounds exhausting, right? It is a lot of work. But I think too, it's like, one, I haven't seen your bank account numbers, but I assume they're also happy. And, and it's like, it's doing well. And if you're living the life that you want to live, and it's, that's going to be part of business, is that like, hey, marketing and advertising, we have to have people who know who we are, whether we like it or not. And if we want to step into that place, then we have to step into that place. And it might be more work that isn't necessarily related to our core thing that we love to do,
Yeah. I would say maybe I'll add Gary Vee to that top 8 MySpace list as well.
Same.
That he creates so much content that it is absolutely impossible to keep up.
Yeah.
But to go in and check in and listen to a few select podcasts or videos every now and then, like it's just an enthusiasm that I don't think anyone else has. And it seems like fake when you first discover him. You're like, who is this guy? I hate him.
Yeah.
And then you watch a few things. You're like, well, he was right about that. Huh? He was right about that too. Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
And I think that you're like absolutely correct when you say that, like, if you brand yourself as a media company and that now all of a sudden you're this wedding photography media company, that means you're basically creating all this content that you wouldn't have created otherwise if you're just focused on wedding photography. Yeah. I would say that if you did that 3 years ago, you're probably seeing some pretty massive results this year and even last year, and even pretty quickly actually. Like everything, if you get something up on Instagram and you make great content there for 2 months, like all of a sudden you kind of go from an unknown business owner to somebody that people actually feel like they know. Which is like a huge accomplishment and something that anyone can do. It's just having the motivation to do it, which seems overwhelming, and there's no direct path to it. And you just kind of have to experiment and figure out what works. And some things work really well, and then you do it again and it doesn't work. That's how I feel with YouTube. It's like, yeah, this video, a huge success. And then I make another similar one and it gets like absolutely no traction. And it's like, okay, so maybe I gave all the value in the first video and I didn't need to do a follow-up. And it's like, what? And yeah, that's another story, the algorithm and kind of the baiting and addiction tactics that they use. But yeah, it's like, I would say in any business that if you are creating yourself to be somebody that's actually in front of a camera from time to time, or at the very least, if you're not comfortable in front of the camera, doing kind of audio or narrating over top of the visuals that you're creating. I've seen so many businesses here go from absolutely unknown to probably one of the top 1 or 2, especially in the realty market around here, that they were no one. And then they were like, well, I can do video, so I'm just going to make a couple videos. And then now all of a sudden they're the most known faces in town and the most recognizable people and the most, in general, I guess maybe they don't have to be the most liked people, that if you just know their face, and it's like, well, who's a photographer in town that I know? And if you know this one photographer that you've seen on Instagram or you've seen on Facebook or TikTok or whatever a few times, like they're probably going to be at the top of your list, or they're going to be in the top 5 at least. So yeah, I think there is value in it, and it's overwhelming, but hopefully as photographers, we actually have the physical tools. At least we have cameras, and you have to learn audio, which is a whole new thing, but I don't know.
Yeah. So I want to ask, speaking of all of that, how do you go through it all? Like from a delegation standpoint, what stuff stays under your tool belt and that you touch you have your finger on everything, and then what do you technically do that is delegated and outsourced?
Yeah, I outsource all of my post-production for both video. I guess we haven't even talked about this. I do photo and video at wedding days. So hybrid coverage, just show up, do both. All of my images go to photographers edit, and all of my video goes to potentially a new company in Miami that I won't reveal yet because we haven't worked together a lot. But I have a local person that does all my video editing for weddings specifically. For content outside of that space, for just kind of general YouTube stuff, I edit pretty much everything that ever goes out there because there is no template for what we're doing. That it's all kind of figuring out as we go. And I'm not very funny in real life, but I can make entertaining content when I'm sitting down and like editing. I'm like, oh, that's funny. Like, okay, cool. That's a good joke. Or I'll think about it and I'll be like, oh, I should have said that in real life, but then I can add it in post. So I retain a lot of control in the edit because I feel like that's when if you looked at the raw footage from like any of the Nikon episodes, it's just like me fumbling to get through an intro. Like, here we are in Havana, Cuba. And then like a car goes by or somebody looks at me while I'm trying to talk to a camera, and then I just freeze up. So yeah, the raw footage is a mess, but we can make something pretty nice in post. So I kind of retain all of that control. And then beyond that, I would say I'm kind of the wedding side of things is very minimal, I would say, as far as time consuming. Like it doesn't really take a whole lot. I come home, put together a smart preview, send it off to photographers edit. My girl will come by and grab a hard drive at some point that week to do the video edit. And that's kind of it. Like that wedding is done. There's no real back end. Leading up to the wedding day, 50% or less, probably less actually this year and the past year, actually do engagement sessions. So it's like, really, I'm there for the wedding day. We have a phone call or potentially a Skype call. I would say 80% of my couples just want to talk on the phone now. I wouldn't say, especially like over the last year, but no one's even asked for an in-person meeting because I have so much, again, like going back to when you're a media creator and you're creating content, like people know that I exist, that isn't a variable, that they're not like, who is this guy? Is he going to disappear with our money? When you have like a photo of you on the newspaper, the local newspaper, it's like, okay, this person is like somebody that's like in the community, people know about him, and like that trust level kind of goes up a little bit. Again, even if it's unrelated for what you do. But there's enough trust that they can just kind of do a phone call and they're happy, or they probably already know that they want to book if they've watched some of our YouTube stuff. And so it's
What does that look like? We'll just focus on wedding because that's probably the largest audience listening to here. But what does that look like? Give us some insights for photographers edit. I'll share mine first to kind of give everybody like a background. Like I come in, same thing, render smart previews, call. If I'm feeling frisky, I'll call first and import. It all depends for me. But this year we've been swamped now that things are back. So I'm like, I'll import into Lightroom and go to bed, and let smart previews render. But then what I'll do is I'll get my culling. I'll pick my, top images, right? Say that's 30 images. Those would be like blog level kind of things. And I'll edit those, right? Those will be like my anchor images. And then I'll export that catalog in Dropbox, send it to my editor. And then they use those images as a reference to edit the other ones, the other, deliverables, if you will, the 2 stars. He sends it back, in like a magical amount of time, like 2 to 4 days. I'm like mind blown every time. He's my second editor I've ever had. And I'm like, what? It's stupid good. He fixes a lot of my mess ups, and so get it back, and then that's it. Like, okay, cool. We can export, upload to the gallery, whatever. What does that look like for you as photographers edit? Nathan Holwitz, love that guy. Boca Podcast, big fan. Is he calling everything too? Or are you literally just saying, hey, go for it?
It's so as of pretty much like a couple of days ago now, I have another layer. So usually what would happen, I would get home from the wedding, I would throw everything in a catalog, build the smart previews overnight as you do. And then in the morning, I would just send it in. Photographers Edit, if you're like a premium member, you can schedule a time that gives you a faster turnaround. I don't necessarily need that crazy fast turnaround because I'm doing it the night of. So I don't mind if it takes a week or whatever. That way, if I don't do it, I don't feel bad for like not delivering on my spot and whatnot. As of now, I think what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to run everything through Aftershoot, so AI culling, and it's going to pull out a lot of the duplicates, eyes closed, whatnot, because I do upload everything, and you pay on what you upload. For culling. So that's going to probably pull out if I shoot 2,000 images on a wedding day, or maybe probably more than that, 3,000. Probably more. I'm in the like every wedding is 3 to 4 hours now, max range. But when we get back to normal wedding days, for it to pull out like maybe 800 or 1,000 photos saves me some money, and it's just like an easy thing. So I'll be running that first, and then in the morning I'll build my catalog with everything. And it'll probably pull out maybe 1,000, maybe more images that don't need to go to somebody else to look through, that it's kind of already done. And then that's like kind of it. Like it goes there, it comes back. I run portraiture on everything to just do some skin smoothing on the final JPEGs. Interesting. And then that's it. Upload to pick time, and life is good.
There you go. I love that. It's even I was just doing some quick math. So even if Aftershoot saves you 1,000 images, that you're like, hey, these are not deliverables, or these are lighting tests, or hey, it's whatever. That's $50 a wedding that you're saving, from sending to Photographers Edit. If like, I assume culling is probably like 5 cents or 7 cents or something. So that's super cool. That's awesome. I've never used portraiture. Tell me a little bit about that. And like, is that literally after export in Lightroom, or do you do that in Lightroom as like a plugin? And were you, especially somebody like you, 15 years of experience, were you just not able to get the skin smoothing that you wanted otherwise, at least in the amount of time that you needed?
Yeah, it's so I run it in Photoshop. I believe you can also run it in Lightroom, but I just have like my batch process set up, and it like doesn't really take much time. So I basically load everything in. I batch process it through portraiture. I just use the default settings, and then I bring the fade the change down to 50%. And I just run it on every single image in the entire gallery. That if it doesn't see a face, it doesn't affect it, and if it does see a face, it just automatically does it. So to go in and like manually do that for kind of key images, too long. It takes on like an M1 chip, I'm gonna say it takes like maybe 15 minutes to do an entire wedding. So every single image, that means that every single family formal has been retouched. I wouldn't say it's like retouched to like I'm gonna put that on like maybe a billboard. I guess the DPI, and that's pretty low. But like maybe that's not going to be the print that they're going to make. I don't have any couples that make like prints of their like huge faces for their for their walls or anything. But if they were making like an 8-foot print of them smiling, facing the camera close up, I would obviously go in and I would do a little more finesse on it. But for just kind of small faces, if it's a group family shot, there's 10 people in the frame, it'll go in, it'll kind of do a little adjustment on everybody, and it's pretty much, you don't notice it. You just kind of, you're like, oh, I like that photo of me. I don't know why. And that's kind of all it does. So I process everything through that. Luminar 4 is also amazing if you're doing just kind of touch-ups on specific images. So if you're like, hey, this is the shot from that shoot, I'm going to run this through and I'm going to process everything to look amazing, that it will do a better job, but it is a bit of a resource hog when it comes to batch processing. And portraiture is just like, it's less than a second an image, I think, to do the corrections, to save, to close the image and open a new one. So it's cool. It's real quick. So
and you can this is a stupid question, but I've literally never heard of this. I've only heard of like alien skin, and honestly, maybe it's just me or my monitor. It felt like diminishing returns at some level, and maybe some of those things maybe are right, where it's like, hey, like. And I don't rely on this, like, oh, the client's not going to care. But that, I'm like, man, is that going to be the top 5%, or whatever? But maybe people like smooth skin, obviously. So that's just happening, like, is it just smoothing? Like, it doesn't look at you can't alter the image. I'm not looking at it and going, oh, wow, they really messed it up, right? Like a retoucher or something like that. Like, it's literally just smoother, like less noise essentially or something.
It just, it like kind of cleans up and makes everything feel just a little bit nicer. That it's,
That's
I
awesome.
wouldn't say if you look at the image that you'd be like, wow, like you did some retouching. That's why I fade it back to 50%. Because
Yeah.
if you run it full, it's like, whoa, yeah, that's a filter. But if you fade it back, it's just like kind of a little bonus niceness to the image that people, I don't know, that they won't be able to tell really.
Interesting.
And yeah, but it doesn't do anything other than that. It doesn't make eyes bigger, lips darker or anything. It's just like,
Yeah.
that's kind of all it does, is just improves
cool.
that. And then try to make sure that, I don't know, I guess like whatever you want the final image to look like, just do the best you can to get that in actual camera.
That's cool. That's cool. I'll have to try that out. And that's it's been a while since I've seen it. Aftershoot looks cool, but it's like we've all been using Lightroom for a long, long time, and I'm hoping that it's gotten better. Ironically, recently, in the last like year or two, I'm like, okay, Adobe still wants our time, because Capture One, man, Capture One's looking amazing. That's awesome. What other man? We're just all over the place. How did you know? I want to go a little bit more on outsourcing for people who are kind of into that. What's your wedding backend look like for communicating with your couples? Are you very hands-on? Are you using a CRM, Honeybook, Tave, like lots of emails? Or are you kind of like, once you book and pay and everything like that, like, hey, a month before the wedding, we'll schedule a phone call, or, and then we'll talk then? Or what's that look like for you?
It's, I would say there's no official, like, one way that everything goes. Some of my couples, especially ones that have more expensive packages, I usually talk to them, like our email string will be like 12 emails. It's like pretty much nothing. It's like, hey, let's schedule a call. We'll talk. Here's the booking info, maybe a couple emails, set up engagement session if needed. But otherwise it's like pretty surprisingly light, that like the 12th email is like, here's your gallery from the day. Other couples, I would say, if they're a little more hands-on, as far as just like asking questions and whatnot, I found that in my early stages as a photographer, that a lot of people just wanted to ask me questions to make sure that, like, hey, remember us? We're still like, we exist. We're people that you're photographing the wedding of. Please verify that we're on your calendar. So I found that a lot of people would check in for that. And that I would have a lot of emails, and for the most part, they were just kind of useless emails that they didn't like. They even probably knew they didn't need to send them. They just wanted to make sure that, like, hey, we don't know if we trust this guy. Like, is he still around? So I found that a lot of communications kind of were like that. I would say that after years in business and maybe hitting back to the whole, like, creating lots of media content and being really out there on the internet, I would say that I get those questions less and less and less pretty much every year. And
I get that too. People know, like, if you post on stories, they know you're alive, hopefully. They assume, they're like, okay, we've seen his face. He knows, we know he's doing something, and it is not emailing us, but we know he's alive. And if it looks like a wedding, that's also good. Like, luckily couples this year, the one thing I'll say is, like, we've been swamped, but it's like I'm getting a lot less, and I do a lot of expectation setting email wise. Like after the wedding day, there's an email that goes out and just says, hey, that was awesome. Just remember, photos will be done within 30 days. If they're done sooner, you'll get them sooner or whatever. And they're always done sooner, obviously. I've gotten a lot less, hey, where are our photos emails? Because it'll be like 2 weeks after, and they're like, hey, you look busy as all get out. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, no, totally.
It's just like that. Yeah, there's no real official way to how it goes. If people want to talk, like, I'm around, I'm happy to do it. I would say that in the beginning, I'm very quick to respond to emails. And then I don't know if this is kind of like training or setting expectations, but at some point I drop from that like instant response to something that takes like maybe a little bit longer. So that they know that, if they know that if they're asking me like a question that's not urgent, that it's going to take a day or two. Whereas most things, I feel like most questions can be kind of solved on their end, like without actually talking to me. That it's usually like a venue thing, or it's usually just me being like, yeah, you should talk to the venue about that, because I don't know like how long your cocktail hour is.
That's smart.
So usually it's kind of like that style of thing over time. And I think that kind of helps minimize things. I think it might also come down to a gender dynamic as well, that my wife, Lindsay, a lot of her couples very much think that they're like their best friends. So she gets a lot of communication that she is like now their best friend, which is great because she books a lot of work. But the downside is that your email box is always like really, really full. I feel like I don't necessarily have that level of friendship with all of my couples. And a lot of them don't necessarily desire that they don't want somebody that's like their new best friend. They just want some, like, they have enough friends. They just want to hire somebody that will fit into the day, that they trust, and they're cool to hang out with for the day. It's, I don't know I should do more research into that to see, but that's kind of the feeling that at least I get locally within our household. I don't know if that scales to citywide or countrywide or around the world, but yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where honestly, like you and I both know, we talk to creators everywhere, and it's like, if it works and it really is working, like obviously, you know, we can't see everything. Like if it's working, it's working. You know, like I mentor a few photographers, and like when they first start out, they'll always be like, yeah, this works for me a lot. Or I don't do this because one client said they didn't like it. And I'm like, but you have 25 clients a year. Like, who cares what the one client said? Like 24 of them are either thrilled or indifferent about it. Or I'm like, this is not working, you know, or like, hey, if you have no money in your bank account, something's not working. What is and I'm sorry, I'm just so curious. I love hearing kind of different, because you shoot high volume of weddings, at least non-COVID times, like I do. And what's average booking price for Toronto Taylor Jackson weddings? I know you do hybrid. Let's pretend video didn't exist. What's photo look like?
It's usually, I would say, around 5,000.
Okay.
I feel like that's
American?
like pretty Canadian. So I don't know what that's.
4,500 American or something?
Yeah, something like that. I would say that's probably maybe on the mid to high end for Toronto in general. There's obviously a lot of photographers here, like there are everywhere. Sure. Coming into my city that's an hour outside, we're almost in a different market that I feel like if I was in Toronto all the time, that I would probably be more likely around kind of the 8,000 mark. Yeah. Simply because it seems weird if somebody like looks at my starting rate and they're like, oh, why is this guy so cheap? In the Toronto prices, but then locally here, it's the best fit that I've found. So so it was a bit of a weird, I don't know if that again, like scales to other cities or people that live in smaller cities near major cities. Sure. But that also comes down to my life happiness of the fact that I want to work locally here, that driving into the city to shoot a wedding comes with basically an additional like 5 hours. Even though it's an hour and a half drive, I got to be there like an hour and a half early in case they close the highway or whatever. Just like different variables come into play and stresses that I don't necessarily love. So I enjoy shooting weddings around here. I enjoy shooting weddings. I'm a preferred vendor at a bunch of different venues that I've worked at a lot. Right. And they're kind of, I would say that those venues attract my ideal couples because they're kind of that all in one house solution. They're like those ceremonies on site. A lot of them are hotels, so they can get ready there. They can sleep there. They can have a reception there. And a lot of my couples are like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And then when they are that style of couple, they very quickly connect with me because I'm very kind of the same mindset that sounds like an amazing, like that's my ideal wedding, that 8-hour day, everything in one spot. Like,
I love that. So, that's what I was going to ask too, is like the, prior to wedding day, I was like, did you have a phone call or an email about kind of some of those details? If like, say things weren't happening all at one place or whatever, do you have that in your workflow where you'll have a call and be like, okay, he's getting ready here, she's getting ready here, and then we convene, at the church or the venue or whatever?
Yeah, it's I give them the option whether they want to do a call, or I usually just say like, if you can just summarize it all pretty easily in an email, if it's a simple schedule. I would say most of my couples, I'm going to say maybe if I'm shooting 60 weddings in a year, maybe 3 of those couples opt for a phone call before. And they're usually ones that we haven't done an engagement session. So if we do an engagement session, usually it's an email for sure. If we haven't, then every now and then it's, we'd love to do a call just to like say what's up. Like we haven't talked to you in a year and a half since we booked you. Be nice to hear your voice, know that you exist again. So that's kind of, I guess, my process prior to the wedding. But it's pretty not hands off, but like I don't get a lot of questions, which is perfect.
That's cool. Yeah, I feel like that's it's so different from how I do things, but in a good way. I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to pull a few things back that aren't necessary, or they're just fluffy, or they're just because I'm a control freak, which I think is like, there's an element of like showing up and be like, yeah, I'm a professional at this. Like, I'm going to do this. Like, I just celebrated 10 years of shooting weddings like a week ago. And it's
congratulations.
Like, thank you. Yeah. We made it. We're still making it, hopefully. We're not dead yet. And the knees still work somewhat. But it's like, like we know what's going to happen, especially nowadays. Like I'm shooting locally. Again, I'm on some venues that I really love working with. And it's like, I might shoot at the same venue 20 times in a year. And I'm like, I know exactly how this is going to go, no matter whether it's a hurricane or snow or wonderful weather. And it's like, why did I get all control-y about this? Or why did I get all, nitty gritty about this versus like a new wedding or a new venue? Like, hey, how do they do that? Or, hey, where can I park? At least in the city, that's always a concern. But it's like, other than that, it's not a big deal. So I love that.
Yeah. I think that it also, like when you're working at the same venues, and if it is a recommended, if you're a recommended vendor of them, I feel like that also, like your trust level is like, oh, they're here a lot, like no problem. Like they know what they're doing. We don't need to ask them. And then also on the other side of that, usually the venue coordinator, whoever is like actually putting together the schedule for their day, they also know how you operate as well. And like there's one venue, unfortunately it closed last year locally here, that they would basically be like, oh, this is a different schedule because this is what Taylor likes to do. And they would send me the schedule and be like, whoa, this is amazing. Like,
this happens.
Thank you so much. Like, yeah.
Yep. I'm thinking of one venue in my mind where they, when I go there, there's like one or two rooms. There's like the bridal suite, and then there is, it's a winery, so there's like a barrel room, right? But it's like refrigerated, it's chilled, but it looks really cool. But there's like security codes on both those doors, right? For obvious reasons. And the planner, they'll always be like, oh, it's you. You know the codes to the doors. You know the Wi-Fi password or whatever, which is, it's so funny. And it's like, it's 20 minutes from my house. And probably like 5 years ago, I talk about this a lot. I was shooting, like many of us, to impress other photographers, right? Like I wanted to put something on my socials and flex and be like, look how creative I am with these non-models. I'm
700 awesome. Off-camera flashes. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, out here, it's like, oh, look at my cool Brenizer. Or, hey, look at this. Again, Sam, like, hey, look at this. I picked up some random chef's tools and I made a photo, And now I'm like, I'm a boring old man. I'm like, my mortgage is happy. I'm happy. The venue and the couple are happy. And like, I still feel creatively fulfilled, right? I had fun, right? Like, this is an awesome job. And it's a lot easier, and so it's like, I don't care about, like, I've shot in Maui and I've shot in Iceland and I've shot in wherever, and it's like, no place like home, baby. I don't know, it's kind of defeatist, other than when it's time to go travel or hang out with buddies or like go do cool stuff. I want that to, now I don't want to use my job to go do cool stuff anymore. I want to just do cool stuff.
Yeah. I found that another good reason to have a travel show is for taxes as well, because now they're all production expenses rather than everything necessarily being like, oh, it's not for fun anymore. It's like literally we're doing content. So that's another life hack that I discovered over the past couple of years.
I love that. Well, dude, I will have to have you come back on time because I have like 4 more things that I want to get to, but I want to keep this kind of nitty gritty. One last question is, where can people go to find more Taylor Jackson? I know it's a stupid question because you're everywhere. And then what are you excited about the rest of this year? Anything cool you're working on that you can share a little bit, a little sneak peek or anything?
Yeah, it's I would say YouTube's probably the easiest place, especially I'm assuming you're probably a photographer if you're listening to this. YouTube, I have a bunch of behind the scenes wedding days. I just as of, I guess, what month is it? June. As of June, sorry if I'm ruining your release schedule. As of June, I just released kind of the biggest wedding photography tutorial I've ever done. It's free on YouTube. It's 2.5 hours long. It's like a full ultimate wedding photography tutorial. So if you're interested in kind of what a full day looks like and also kind of everything surrounding it, that's kind of everything that I could ever tell you. Beyond that, it is a lot of random content, mostly weddings. And then also we do a show with Nikon, so travel content and
love that.
Some Z series focused stuff if you're a Nikon mirrorless shooter as well.
You just cut out. I love that, man. You, I saw that you did a full wedding, and then like you have tons of courses too that we didn't talk about. We'll have to talk about some other time. You have a TikTok course, which I'm going to buy just because I want to watch it. And then you have all kinds of other educational content, which I think, like, again, you're the Gary V. No one else is putting out that much content in the wedding world and education world. So I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for checking out The Bearded Hog. It really means a lot. If you can, leave a like on the video. If you want to see more videos, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications on when new videos come out immediately. Have a wonderful day, guys, and keep being awesome.